My husband's father-in-law passed away in Oklahoma, so we went up there to attend the funeral. And when we got there, we heard a baby crying, and I kind of followed the noise to it and realized that there was a baby outside in a tent, and she had no diaper, no bottle, no clothes on. And so I picked the baby up and went inside the home, and there was 5 adults sitting there. And I asked why the baby was outside, and the biological mother told us that the NyQuil wasn't working, the baby wouldn't stop crying. And I asked them, you know, what are you gonna do? And they asked me to take the baby to raise her for myself. And so I said, okay, what about Buddy? He was a 1-year-old son that was in a home, and she told us that he's old enough to take care of himself, that he'll be okay. And you know, we were doing very well. Mary Jane started thriving as a little toddler, and we got a phone call in July of 2010 from the Bilo mom, and she said New Mexico CPS is coming after Buddy, and she needed somewhere to stay. And we let him spend the night, and Buddy was dressed head to toe in long sleeve clothing here in Texas in a summer heat, and he would never talk. He kind of hid behind his mom, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And the next day she made a phone call to her mother and had an argument, and Buddy approached her and she shoved him against our dining room table. And so I told my husband she had to leave, and I told her she needed to leave Buddy here until the investigation from New Mexico was over. We put her on a train to Oklahoma, and I put Buddy in a bathtub. And when I did, his body was covered in bruises, cuts, burns, an entire handprint across his bottom, and finger marks of the indentions on his hand. And it was hard to see it because I've never seen a kid ever beaten. And we contacted the mom, and she just kept telling us not to tell, not to tell. I couldn't do that. He was pretty beaten, and so I took him to the local hospital and called Child Protective Services here in Cleveland, and they met us there, and they made us bring our other children so that they can make sure our kids weren't abused and our story was true. And his abuse was so bad, they transported us to a children's hospital in Fort Worth, and it took 16 hours to document his body. And that was when we learned that he had a sexually transmitted disease called anal warts. And the doctor asked me to contact the mom to find out, you know, why he had anal warts and what she knew. And during the conversation, she admitted to 8 men sexually assaulting him. And so Child Protective Services sat down with her and told her to give us custody of Buddy, and until she straightened up her life, she could not be around her child. And so she left. CPS never came back, and I called them because when we had Buddy, he walked in corners. We found him hiding in his closet, under his bed, and a few times he even had a butter knife hidden under his pillow. And I asked for help. And Texas social worker said she was not obligated to help us, that the abuse didn't happen here, and just walked away. And so I contacted 8 different facilities trying to get some psychiatric help, and they told me we can't help children that are under the age of 5. They're not vocal enough. And so I reached out to another mother here in Texas that has a child with reactive attachment disorder, and she sent me some therapy that I could do with him at home. And we would line our children up, and every night they would hug Buddy and give him a kiss and tell him that they loved him. He was never gaining weight. And so for a 1.5 years, Buddy was the same 27 pounds. And every doctor told us it's okay. He was born with a lot of medical issues, and he's an abused child. That keep going, that he'll be okay. And I couldn't deal with the fact that people kept telling me that it was okay for a 3-year-old to weigh 27 pounds for a 1.5 years. And so we started providing nutrients for him. We gave him Ensure, protein drinks, vitamins, and Buddy gained weight. He was up to 32 pounds. Thursday of March 21st, Buddy threw up at the dinner table, and he said his stomach was not feeling well, and so I laid him down to bed. And the next morning I got the kids up, took them to school, and Buddy was still complaining that his stomach hurt, so I was planning on taking him to the doctor. But as I was doing laundry with my son that stays home and he has a heart condition, we heard a noise from Buddy's room. And when I went into the room, he was breathing, but he wasn't looking at us. It's like he was looking off in his face, and I just tried to, Buddy, trying to get him to focus, and he just laid there. And I immediately called 911, and she asked if he was breathing, and I said yes, and she said to get him off the bed. And when I did, he took his last gasp of air. He stopped breathing. And so I put him on the floor and started CPR. And he just started turning cold and white. And I couldn't save him. The ambulances came and picked him up and took him out to the ambulance. And they wouldn't let me go out there. And I kept asking how he was, and no one would answer me. And so I said, I need to call my husband. He was at work. And they asked me to call one of my friends that lived by that can help me with the kids. And I said, why? And that's when the police officer told me that Buddy was dead. All of a sudden, all these people started showing up at our house. And we had police detectives. We had officers with guns. We had firemen. We had ambulance drivers. And they said that Buddy was small for his age, and because of the scars on his body, they needed to have a warrant to come in my home, that they thought we did something to Buddy. And I said, you're wrong. I said, CPS has his records on file. I can give you detectives' phone numbers of the abuse that will verify the scars on his body, and that Buddy's always had a weight issue. And I said, but I'll sign your warrant, and they came in. And of all the people who came in, only one officer, Detective Summy, looked at me and said, I'm sorry for your loss. They searched her home, and this lady walks in the house and she tells me that she was a police detective. And I said, okay. And she goes, I need you to retell me your story. And I did. And after I got done, she said, I am not a police detective. I'm a Texas social worker. And you killed your son, and I'm taking your 7 other children. And I said, you're wrong. I said, you have a 2010 case of Buddy that will prove the marks on his body are scars. She wouldn't listen. She just kept telling me I killed my son, and that she believed that I starved him to death and beat him. I provide them medical evidence. I tell them the social worker who handled our case in 2010, and they told me, we don't know who that is. She doesn't work for our office. And they didn't believe anything. And so she said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You're going to tell your children that their brother is dead and that they can't go home. We kept fighting for our kids. And we kept telling them, you're wrong, and nobody would listen to us. And we provided people who see my son 2 days before death, 3 days, and 5 days before death. And CPS refused to interview them. They refused to contact the people that we told them would know Buddy's medical history, and it's like they didn't want to know the truth. During the process from March 22nd until the April hearing, I lost over 45 pounds. I was very ill, and no one could figure out what was wrong. And it was learned that I had a bacterial infection called H. pylori. And I asked for Buddy's body to be tested for it because he was throwing up like I was. They refused. And so we motioned the court to force them to test my children, because if it can almost kill me, my kids were in danger. So they did court order it, and my son was positive for H. pylori like me. And we called the coroner and asked them, please test it, please test it. They refused. And So on May 20th, we were going to a court hearing to fight for our children, and the judge got off the stand and said, I'm letting you know you're being arrested, that a 6-page autopsy was turned in and they ruled your son's death homicide by starvation. We were handcuffed and shackled in a court hearing and sent to the jail. We don't have any money, and thankfully one of our friends bonded us out that day. And during our visits, my son came and said, I'm going to kill myself. He said that he had a whole entire runaway plan, that the foster parents were allowing an 18-year-old man to hold him down, beat him, and sexually assault him on a day-to-day basis.
Shooting with BB gun?
Shooting with BB guns. And I looked at my worker and I said, what? You removed him on false allegations and you're letting people do what? And she looked at me and she says, sometimes kids lie. And I raised up my son's shirt and he was covered in bruises. And she said she would address it. And he came back to the next visit and he would even talk to us. And he said, Mom, you told a social worker, she told my foster parents, and the beatings got worse. The district attorney decided to reach out, and he contacted the people who seen Buddy 2, 3, and 5 days before death, and people who've known Buddy, and verified that our story was in fact the truth. So on December 17th, he dropped all charges against us and let us go. And we motioned the court to return our children, and Judge Keith Dean came to an emergency hearing and removed my kids from foster care, but wouldn't give them back to me. They placed them with a church member of mine, all 7 kids, and our kids start telling us the stories of foster care. They told us about being locked in their rooms from 7:30 at night till 9 in the morning, where they had to pee their pants. They had alarms on their doors. They told us about the foster dad grabbing my son by the arm and leg and throwing him into the rooms. They told us that we only knew that one of our sons was reporting sexual assault. Evidently, there was an investigation early on into foster care where 2 of my other children were being sexually abused, and they ruled it horseplay.
That the kid's attorney knew about all the time.
So the entire time, CPS, the Children's Court ad litem attorney, all knew that they were being abused and never once told the court. They left them in the home. So now we are trying to get our lives back on track. But it doesn't bring my son back. It doesn't change the fact we were accused of murdering him. Our names were smeared clear across all the way to United Kingdom. I can't go into my kid's school because I'm on the child abuse registry, although the medical examiner said no abuse was found. I can't get a job because I have criminal records. I have to get expunged now, although all charges were dropped. Our social workers are still social workers, and the foster parents who allowed abuse and neglect to my 7 kids are still fostering. But this is wrong for all families, and so now we're choosing to speak out and to help any other families being, bombarded by this agency that's supposed to be protecting our kids.